Kim Bobo is the founder and executive director of Interfaith Worker Justice, a national organization that mobilizes religious support for low-wage workers. Since its founding in 1996, the organization has built a network of more than 60 religious labor groups around the country and worked on a variety of economic justice issues.
Thank you for allowing me to testify. My name is Kim Bobo. I'm the director of Interfaith Worker Justice. We run a network of 19 worker centers around the country where workers who haven't gotten paid come for help. The number one problem we see is wage theft. Workers are not getting paid. Out of this, I've just finished a book that's being published this fall on wage theft. And I have to tell you, it's a national crisis at this moment in our nation. 2 to 3 million workers aren't paid minimum wage. 3 million workers are misclassified. Estimates are that millions are illegally denied overtime pay. Billions of dollars are at stake every year. So if the question is wage and hour doing important work, then the answer is yes. Is the question, are there dedicated wage and hour staff who are hardworking? Then absolutely the answer is yes. But if the question is the Department of Labor effectively enforcing our wage and hour laws? Are they stopping and deterring wage theft? Then the answer must be a resounding no. Let me offer 5 recommendations for strengthening the wage and hour division. First, we need to develop a community policing model. Local police forces have found that they've got to create partnerships. We've been a part of some of the partnerships that Wage and Hour has developed, but they have inadequate staff and resources. Let me give you an example. A couple years ago, we started a worker center in Houston. When we got there, we saw all the billboards around advertising the partnership that Wage and Hour Division had developed. And the billboards had phone numbers you could call if you had a wage and hour violation. The problem was no one would answer the phone. So you had this entire effort with no one staffing the phone. Eventually we got permission to answer the phone, but it was not an adequate situation. I heard last week from our workers center in Northwest Arkansas that they had sent over to the Wage and Hour Division 60 wage complaints that they thought were legitimate. 2 of them were investigated. 1 resulted in back wages. Now, maybe we didn't get all the information we needed, but we need to work together to figure out how to collect these back wages. Second recommendation, we need to devote 50% of the Wage and Hour Division staff and resources to targeted investigations. Most of the work right now, because of the limited resources, is done by investigators answering the phone and trying to call the employer and get things settled. It's not sufficient. We need to figure out these industries and devote half of the resources to doing investigations. In 1941, the division conducted more than 48,000 on-site investigations. They inspected 12% of the establishments covered by the law. Today, there are 30,000 enforcement actions, and half of them are simply phone calls to the employers. That's about 1/3 of 1% of workplaces have any action whatsoever. Third recommendation, we must punish those who steal wages in meaningful ways. Usually, the worst thing that will happen to an employer who does not pay a worker's wages is that they have to pay the back wages that should have been paid in the first place. More often, the employer will pay less than was actually owed. Now, Mr. Passantino just suggested that it's a trade-off between prompt payment versus penalties. I would suggest to you today that if we do more rigorous penalties using liquidated damages, fines, interest, and if we do that consistently and we publicize it regularly, that we will more often get prompt payment. It's not an either or, that if we do penalties, it will force prompt payment on a more regular basis. 4, we must experiment with new educational enforcement approaches. This includes more pilot projects with these worker centers that are on the ground working, exploring creating one-stop centers for workers to come find out about not only wage and hour but OSHA problems, and also to create some joint task forces between wage and hour, particularly to focus on industries that are known to both steal wages and injure workers. Finally, we've got to increase the number of enforcement staff and the attorneys devoted to wage and hour compliance. No matter how effectively the division uses its resources, it can't do the job with only 750 enforcement staff around the country to protect 130 million workers. It's not enough. And when there are cases filed, you got to have attorneys that are going to back them up. Last year, there were 7,000 FLSA cases filed in federal court. The Department of Labor only did 151 of those. The Department of Labor needs to back up its investigators by taking employers to court. Wage theft is bad for America. It hurts workers. It places ethical employers at a competitive disadvantage. It robs resources from the public coffers, and it denies communities
Bobo.
the economic stimulus. Thank you very much.